Welcome back to the Gloomwood inventory tutorial. This is going to be the fifth part. In this part, we're going to take the actor component for the inventory that we made in the last part, and we're going to make an extra component that's going to handle that information and turn it from that inventory array into something that we can actually visually see. Let's get into it. We're going to need two pieces for this. First, we're going to go into our blueprints. We're going to go and right click, blueprint class, actor components, and we'll call this AC underscore 3D inventory. And I didn't really find a good name for this, so it's a bit similar to that. Just remember that this is the 3D one. It's going to interpret what this one tells the player, or any actor that has this has an inventory, and anyone that has this can interpret that inventory and display it. Well, obviously the actor component itself doesn't display anything because it can't do that, but if it's on it, it will look for other components to handle it for it. And that's what we're going to set up. We're going to make our second actor, which is going to be used to test this whole system. So we're going to right click, blueprint, actor, and we'll call this a chest, because that's in essence what it's going to be. It's just going to be, or in our case right now, what we're going to do today, we won't be able to interact with it, but it will be able to display the items as they get added to it. So we can test with the pre-populate that we set up last time. So we're going to open the chest up, and we'll do that first. Then we'll handle the 3D inventory. So open up the chest. And so in the chest, the first thing we need is our two actor components. So first is AC inventory. Second is AC 3D inventory. So once again, here we're going to put some pre-populated stuff later, and this will allow it to be displayed. So inside of here, we're going to need a static mesh, this, and we're going to need two other things, which are a widget, which is going to be our actual interaction, or not interaction, sorry, which is going to be our UMG grid, so we can tell it how big it's going to be. And then we're going to need our widget interaction, which is for later. We're not going to use it, but it's to allow us to actually click on it and hover the buttons and so on. But we're just going to set everything up first. So for the static mesh, what we're going to use is we're going to look for a cube. And the cube we're looking for is the one inside basic shapes. You guys can't see it for some reason popping up on my second screen, but if you hover here, you should see engine, basic shapes, cube. That's the one we're looking for. We're going to set its size to 2 on the X and 0.25 on the Y. On the Z, sorry, not the Y. The Y we leave at 1. And so this just kind of gives like a rectangular shape, and we're just going to put our widget on top of this, which is the next thing we're going to do. Actually, first we're just going to put this at 10 in height. Yeah, one other thing we want to make sure we do is the widget needs to be attached to the default scenery, not to the static mesh. So drag this here, attach, and it should appear like this. Now for the widget, we want to make sure it appears on top here, because right now, even if we play, we won't be able to see anything because well, actually right now if we play, it's going to be very big, but we're going to deal with that in a second. So for the widget, what we want is we want to look for -100 on the X. We want to put -50 on the Y and 22.525 on the Z. And so what this is it's going to put our inventory right in the top left corner, and we're going to put our pivot to be 0, 0, so that it also appears in the top left corner. So change the pivot here to 0 and 0. That means that our widget will always appear in the top here and stretch this way. And the reason it's this 22.525 is because we want it to appear slightly above this, but not too much that we can actually see the difference, but enough that it doesn't cause any Z level fighting. Those who aren't aware what that is, it's kind of when you get that flash of two textures overlapping with each other, and it doesn't look very nice. So we want to avoid that by having it be slightly above. As for the different parameters for the user interface, we want to set our class, and our class is our grid. So search for UMG grid. It should appear about here. You shouldn't have too many. It's like that. And this won't change anything visually. You won't be able to see it. But what you can do now is the rest. We want it to be 1920 by 180 in the draw size. That's pretty much about the ratio of our grid that we made, or how big we want it to be. And next, we want to make sure that we say draw a desired size. The last thing we need is right now, if we place this, we can see if it works. Normally, if we add our chest here, if we play, and eject, we should be able to see its actual, sorry, no. The reason we don't see anything is because it is actually not going to work, because we don't actually tell it to do anything. We don't give it a size or anything like that right now. But we'll do that in a second. But so for right now, it may not be visible, but I believe if we move it, we can sometimes see, yeah. So if you can see that kind of weird line popping in and out about this area here when I move it, that's the actual size of the widget. That's how big the widget is right now. Because I'm not really sure how Unreal handles the size of these widgets. I still haven't managed to figure it out, because even if we say draw size this big, it kind of doesn't, or at least I don't find it makes very much sense, because I don't believe this right here, if I put, for instance, 20, I don't think that is 20 units here. I don't think it's the same. So for now, I'll just give you the values I use. You're obviously free to play around with them and get a different result. It's fine. So what you want to do here is you want to make sure these are all 1 on each axis. And the reason for that is because this draw size is going to determine the shape. And so that is the kind of rectangle we have here. And we can lock these because so we want to scale them. So to make sure it is pretty much the right size, I used 0.2. And I'm pretty sure 0.2 will cover this entire area. And so we'll just have to see if that is the case. So for now, we can't see it. This is pretty much all we have to do here. We don't have to do anything else. The next step is our actual new 3D component. So we're just going to do a test first to see if it exists. So open it up. We'll put a print and we will just play. And we should have hello because it is right here. We're not actually going to need our begin play or our tick anymore. So we can remove both of these. As for what we're going to do, we're going to make our variables first. So we're going to need 6 of them. So let's make all 6 and then we will go through them. So the first one is going to be a reference to our actor component inventory. So we're going to say inventory ref or reference. And that's going to be AC underscore inventory. And it is not going to be exposed on spawn. And the way we're going to set this up is we're going to have a function called Initialize. And in our chest, we're going to say on begin play, we initialize. So that's how we're going to do our begin play. Because if, for instance, in our case where we have our briefcase later, when the briefcase opens, we might not want it to initialize and deinitialize itself on begin play and on deconstruct. We want to maybe have it when it actually closes or when it opens at a specific point in the animation. So to do that, we can't just say begin play here. So we create a function and we handle that within here. Next, we're going to add a items array. And this is going to be of type actor. And so what this is going to store, so if we right click here, turn it into an array, is it's going to store a copy, in essence, of the inventory here. It's going to have our 3D objects instead of our item structure. And they're going to use the same indexes and it's going to be the same size. And so that way we can compare between the both if we need to make any changes. Next, we're going to need the item class. And this isn't useful as of right now. This is an actor and it's going to be a class reference. We're not going to use this, at least not as it is, or we're not going to use it now. But what it's for is if later down the line when we make it, and let's say we want to have, let's say one of the things we're going to do in the last part, which is kind of a bonus, is we're going to make an extra item class, which is going to be designed to be like a store item. And so what that means is, well, if it's a store item, we need to be able to say our system cannot just spawn one item, but spawn a class. So we can change which class we want to spawn. We only have 5 variables here, not 6. Then we want the widget component. And so this is going to be the parent of our, or it's going to be specifically this, as we do need to reference that as well in the system. So there's going to be a widget component, this one right here. And so we're just going to sort these by putting our widgets in a widget category and everything else in an inventory category, like this. There we go. Now, let's start by making our initialize and deinitialize. Well, actually, we'll just go through all our functions first. we're going to start by making a receive underscore hover slot. We can duplicate that and just rename it to unhover. Then we'll make a new function we'll call populate 3D, another one called initialize, and another one called DeInitialize. Initialize. There we go. I'll actually add. No, that's fine. Then add item to inventory and remove item from inventory. What we want to do is, if for instance in this function, what we'll do is we will say, okay, we want to add an item to inventory. Then we can say add item to inventory here, but we also add it here so that we spawn a new one. Or in the reverse case, we remove it from the inventory here and we remove it from the items here and destroy that item. What we're going to do is we're going to start with our initialize. We're not just going to go through and like this. And the reason we're going to do that is because the initialize will allow us to test whether the items spawn correctly. So we're just going to sort these first. So this is going to be in we'll put them in constructor. Yeah. And this is going to be DeInitialize as well, and populate 3D because it mainly is used in initialization. This is going to be receive. Not like that. There we go. And we'll call these ones direct as well. Okay, so let's start with our initialize. So what our initialize needs to do is it pretty much needs to set up these variables right here. So to do that, we want to do a sequence here so it's a bit more readable. And we're going to start by saying get owner. And this means we get a reference to the actor that our AC3D inventory is on. And so we're going to say get component by class. And what we're looking for is we're looking for our widget. So widget component. And we'll say, is it valid? And if it is, that means we have a widget component set up on the system so we can actually use it. And so in that case, we're going to promote it to our widget component here on valid. Just add a reroute here to line it up. And just to check if this is working, if we put print here and we go back into our HS and we can remove this, and on begin play, we are going to say initialize. And it will naturally understand which one we're talking about, and it is initialize AC3D inventory right here. And so this will work because we have a widget component here. If we play, we should get hello. Now to test if that is true, let's remove our widget. So we're just going to delete it. Make sure you don't Control-Shift-S or you won't be able to undo. If we play now, we don't get hello. So let's just go back and undo that so it reappears. And if we try again, it says hello once again. So it is indeed detecting as it should. And next with this, what we'll do is we know it's a widget component, and a widget component itself, we can't, for instance, cast to UMG because it's not actually the parent of the UMG. It is just a component. But from it, we can say get widget, which will return the actual UMG itself. So a user widget object reference. So now we can cast to UMG grid. And we don't really have much of a choice here other than making a brand new blueprint interface just to convert this to this without a cast. But normally, if ever you have an AC3D inventory, you should have a grid sitting there because otherwise it doesn't work. So both of them should technically be loaded. And this is only called on spawn, so it's not that much of an issue. So we're going to promote, set our UMG grid right here. And the last thing we want to do is with our UMG grid, right here, you can pull a reference instead, we can say bind event to hover. And we're going to do the same thing for unhover as well. So right here, we're going to say create event. And I completely forgot we need to actually set this for our receive. We need to make sure it has the parameters. And the parameter is UMG slot. And it's true. And it's the same for hover as well. So this will be slot. We'll just call it on both. There we go. And now it should appear in our select function. Hover like this. And we'll copy it and say unhover bind. drag this a bit, create event again, and select unhover slots. So now what this means is if our mouse goes over any of the slots on the grid, it will be able to be handled within our 3D inventory actor component as well. So that does it for this part. Next, our second part of the sequence. And this part is about the inventory, because as we mentioned, now we have the widget component, so we have these two. Now we need a reference to our inventory. Now the inventory is going to be a bit different. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to say is valid first is what we're going to check. And what we're going to check for is the same thing as this. So copy our get component by class and our owner. And we're going to look for AC inventory. Make sure you choose the second one, not the first. Plug this in here. And unlike before, we're going to do this a bit differently. We're going to promote this to our AC or our inventory reference here if it's valid. But if that's not the case, we still need to use it. And the reason that is if we have right here, we have a chest, and in our chest, we have our inventory, and that works just fine. There's no problem. But if it is the player, we don't have our 3D inventory on the player, because the player will be spawning a briefcase, which is another actor, and that actor itself needs to have the player inventory. But we're not going to give the player inventory to an actor that doesn't exist. We're just going to keep it on the player, and what we'll do is we're going to create a means to, if it's not valid, get it to be valid. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to create an event dispatcher for this, and we're going to call it link inventory. And so what link inventory is going to do doesn't have any inputs. We're just going to call it here. Event dispatchers tend to be a bit complicated, so we're just going to take a bit of time to go over this. So how this works is right here. Think of it this way. If we pass this function, we start our initialization like we started here, and it's going to go through, it's going to do this, that's fine, no problem, and then it's going to get to here. And if we do it in our chest, it's going to say, oh, well, we have an actor inventory right here. So we just save it, no problem. Now, in the case we have a briefcase, we do not have this AC inventory, not on this actor. And so instead of going and making a convoluted way to say, find a component on any actor in the map, making it very complicated and giving even a chance that you choose the wrong actor component, instead we're going to use this. And so how we're going to use this is rather simple, to be fair. So in our HS, I'll show you how we use it. If we select our AC 3D inventory, if we go all the way to the bottom, we have link inventory. And so if we call this, right here, we have this getting called here. And so what that means is when it reaches this point, it'll call this function. And so what we can say here is we can say, oh, well, we'll set the AC inventory here. We'll get our 3D inventory. We'll say set inventory reference, and we will just set it here. So in this case, we don't need it here, obviously, because we already know that it's a part of it. But in the case of, for instance, our briefcase actor, we would just have to create an external reference that we set on spawn because it's being done from the actual player character. So in that case, we can set it here instead. And so that's how we're going to circumvent the issue of the briefcase not having its own AC inventory. Now, when we do that in, I think, either next part or the part after that, I'll explain it again just in case, because it can be a bit messy to understand sometimes. So remove that, compile, and let's get back to this. So now, if this is the case, we can reroute, because now this system does technically the same thing. And we want to have a final check before we do anything else, because this is a basic setup. And depending on what happens here, if it succeeds, we're going to say populate 3D, meaning we start showing our different items. But if it fails, we're going to say destroy component. And this is a bit of a messy way to do it, but it's pretty much to say it didn't work. We don't want to have the inventory exist. We don't want to have its logic run if it doesn't even have the bare minimum to function. So the bare minimum to function is 3 conditions. First is get UMG grid. Is it valid? Is this valid? So we're going to check, is it, with an and pass it here. Now, the way this is bad is if this happened. If this went through, it's perfect, no problem. If it failed here or it failed here, then this is invalid and we cannot continue. The other thing we want to check is we want to say, is our inventory valid? So copy or control and drag that in, copy out is valid. If this is true as well, and remember, even if we call our link inventory here, that doesn't necessarily mean that that you will put inventory reference and set it to be true. And it's also possible that your reference that you're using to set it is invalid. So if at any point that doesn't work, same thing, we don't have a reference to a valid inventory, we can't populate it, we don't know what to use. And the final one is we want to make sure our item class here does class implement interface. And so this is the same as does actor, does object implement interface. And same thing as our inventory, if we don't have the BPI share on the class that we're using, we can't use the class. Even if we spawn the items, we wouldn't know how to get the necessary data, we wouldn't have the pre-populated data, we wouldn't be able to do all the stuff that we need to do. So we want to check if our interface BPI share is being used. And so if these three conditions are met, then that means we can go forward and we can actually populate it. So let's compile and do exactly that. Let's open the populate 3D and try and set this all up. So the first thing we need to do is we have a reference to our grid. We are going to create our grid. We're going to say create empty grid. And what we're looking for is our inventory reference. And we're going to get its total slots. We're going to get its max, its columns, because we just called it columns. Here and here. And this should technically make our inventory appear, or our grid appear as it is. Or how it should appear at least. So if we just have this and we run a chest, we should have something appear normally. So if we play now, we should have had an inventory, unless the inventory doesn't have a quantity yet. It does. So for some reason, this isn't what. Let's just add a print here to see if it is. Print. If we play, so something's wrong. So we have an issue. Now, sorry. Of course, there's an issue. By default, our item class is empty. So it is blocking and saying we can't do anything because there's no class. So what we need is our A item, because our A item does have that information. So if we now play, we should have, there we go. So as you can see, we do have an inventory and it is visible and it is 35 units. It's just not oriented correctly because I forgot to touch the rotation. So go back into our widget very quickly, not our widget, our HS. And we want to make sure our widget is 90 on the rotation on the X, 90 on the Y, and 180 on the Z. And so now if we play it, we should have our inventory. Yep, that covers up the whole box pretty much. I don't think it's perfect, but it's very difficult to tell that it's not perfect. So there we go. We have our grid and it's appearing in 3D just fine. Next is the items themselves. Now, the items won't spawn properly just yet, because if we go back and look at our A items here, we don't have anything for if they do spawn in an item. We only have our world system, sorry. So for now, we'll leave it. We'll get back to that in a second. Next, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to get our AC, or our inventory reference, sorry. We're going to get our inventory, and we're going to for each loop right through it. So drag to the array. Now all we have to do is spawn actor from class. The class we're using is item class right here. And one thing that is absolutely crucial that we do here is we make sure that we say owner is our get owner. And we want to make sure we choose the component here. And the reason we do this is so that we can make sure that an item that is spawned in the inventory has the owner being the inventory actor. And that way we can actually differentiate between an item that is being dragged or is in the world, or an item that is actually on the inventory itself. So like this, let me just save that. And for the transform, we're going to say make transform, and we leave it as is, because we don't actually need to do this. We'll do this in the actual item itself. So let's reroute this because we need this information a bit later. One of the issues this causes, this system, is if, for instance, we had our, let's say, if we said A items. If we know it's A items, we can actually pass this item data through. But the problem is we don't have a guarantee that that is the case. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to need a new function to the blueprint interface. So in blueprints, not blueprints right now, structure. In BPI, we're going to create a new set one, and we're going to say set total data. And what this does is, as the name suggests, it's going to set the total data for this function. So, no, sorry. What this is going to do is it's going to take an input of our ST inventory, and inside of our item, we're going to say, oh, well, we use this to set all the information or all the variables of our ST inventory. So this is going to be new data, we'll call it. Compile and save, we can close this. And so what we'll say is from here, we'll add a reroute and we will say set total data. And this is all we need from this. Plug this in, pull this a bit down. And now we're going to add the new item we just created to our items right here. Not set, add, sorry. So add it right here. And the last thing we need to do for this system to be done, for this add to inventory to be complete, is we need to make sure we attach it. Because if our briefcase or our inventory were to move, we need to make sure that it moves correctly and along with it, sorry. So call attach to component. And the target being the actor itself, so being the new item we just spawned. And the parent we're going to use is we're going to use our widget comp, because that's really what we want to attach to. The widget comp is kind of the surface the items are going to be on. So in most cases, that's what you want. Make sure everything is keep relative for all three. We don't need to weld the simulated bodies. It doesn't really matter if it is or it isn't, because we're not doing any physics-based stuff, so it doesn't matter. And that will do it for this. If we currently play this right now, nothing will happen because there's nothing in the inventory. If we go to our A chest and actually do add something, so in our pre-populate, let's say 2, and we'll say I. So this should add 2 of them, but it doesn't actually display anything. Because you can see here, it has added the item, but because the item doesn't know what shape it's supposed to appear as, it doesn't know what to do. So let's go to our A item and fix that. So close this, go to our blueprint, A items, and right here we're going to make a new graph, and we're going to call this graph set data graph, and we're going to use it specifically to use the set data function. So set total here, which will always appear in event graph, which is a bit annoying. Copy it and paste it, or don't copy it, sorry, cut it and paste it here, and then we just need to say item data, set it to the new data. With this, sorry, we're going to consider this as a kind of start point. Because this is called immediately after the spawn, instead of calling event begin play here as we have it here and saying, well, delay a frame because we might not have finished setting this data because we cannot call this before because obviously it doesn't exist. So what we have to do is we have to use this as the begin play. And in the normal event begin play, we'll only do it when it spawns in the world. So here's what we need to do. We now have the item data. We're going to break it, and we are going to say set our static mesh. So set static mesh right here. Let's plug this in, and just this alone should be enough to give us the visual now for when we spawn it. So if we just play, if you look here, we do have our mesh like we want. Now, it's not perfect, and I don't know if we're going to cover this in the video, but we're going to have to resize all this, obviously, depending on the situation. Yeah, I think for now, we're not going to do that today because it's going to take up way too much time. So for now, we're just going to have to limit ourselves to just seeing the items here. Even if it isn't very pretty and it doesn't look great, we're going to have to leave it at this for this part because it's going to take a long time to do all the rest, and the rest also includes moving and all that, so we're just going to keep that all for its own video. So let's finish this up. A few little functions left to do. Let's move on to DeInitialize. DeInitialize, very simple. Get the items and just delete them. Just say destroy actor, and it's as simple as that, because we don't want to obviously remove items from inventory. We just want to close the 3D visual of that. So this is all we have to do here. Next up is the add item to inventory and the remove item from inventory. So let's just close all the other ones and we'll start with add item. So actually we do need to know which item we're adding. So look for an actor and it's going to be item, and we're going to do the same thing for remove, just add item. There we go. So let's start with add, as we mentioned before. So what we'll do is we will call from our AC reference here, our inventory reference, sorry, add item to inventory. And by default, we don't know this information. So to get this information, we need our inventory reference, and we're going to say get complete data, and we're going to use our item that we have as an input right here. And we just plug this into here, and that's the result we want. And obviously, we then need to say for our items that we want to add this item into here. And if you're wondering when we use this function is specifically used when we drag an item from one inventory to another or from the ground into the inventory, because in that case, the item already exists, but it isn't a part of the inventory, but it will be once we do this. So we can actually copy this and place it here for the remove. And we're just going to remove our add item and say remove item from inventory. Same thing, we still need the complete data. Plug this in, go here, and there we go. Not add, sorry, this needs to be turned into remove item. So we just have a few little extra bits we need to do before we're done. We need an event dispatcher for hover slot, another one for unhover slot. So for hover and unhover, we need to have a reference to the 3D inventory that is being hovered and unhovered, and we do reference to the slot. So we're looking for our UMG slot here, and this will be our 3D inventory, we'll call it, and the other one will be slot. And we're going to do this for both of them, so we have to do them twice. The first one is 3D inventory, and it will be our 3D inventory name and then slot. And so for both of these, we just simply want to call them in here, hover slots right there, and we're going to put the slot in here and self as the 3D inventory. Now we'll just get our slot here to make it more readable. And we can copy both of these and move to the unhover. And in unhover, we just call our unhover slot. And the target is self by default. We don't need to plug it in. And there we go. That'll do it for our 3D inventory. We are going to have some extra event dispatches here for hovering, unhovering an item, and also clicking it. But for now, we're just going to stick with this because we can't actually do it because we're still missing a piece. So thank you for watching. And I know this was a bit of a short part and we didn't get to kind of have a fully functioning system, but we do now have an actual means of displaying the grid in 3D, of displaying items, even though the items aren't the right size. So in the next part, we will, I think, be handling the resizing of the items correctly, and in the part after that we'll be doing interaction with the mouse and opening a briefcase, and I think we'll have to see how that goes. So thank you for watching. For those who are interested, I've just added a new tier to the Patreon, and in that tier it will give you access to the project files. Instead of being just the final version, it will now have each part of the series. So at the moment it only has the Gloomwood. So if you want to see, for instance, the results of this part, you'll be able to see them right now on the Patreon, and also obviously the previous part. So if you want to check your progress as you go, instead of having to specifically look at the last part and wait until it's done, then that option is available to you if you're interested, obviously. And thank you everybody who's been supporting me on Patreon. And I will see you in the next part. Goodbye.